Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel today. I would like to thank everyone for joining. My name is Adela Ordóñez, and I'm a lead designer at Palo IT. I'm going to be facilitating the panel today. We're going to be touching on a subject that we're very interested in and that we're very passionate about, and it's about ecosystems. We're also going to be talking about partnerships and how all of these can come together to drive innovation, but also to drive sustainable development. So we have a really interesting and inspiring set of panelists here today. So we're gonna just give a couple of minutes to let everybody join the session, and then we're gonna be right back. So welcome back, everyone, and welcome back to the panel. We're very excited to have this really interesting set of panelists today here with us. And I wanna just set the stage before we jump into the questions. So you guys know we only have about 10 more years to reach 2030, which is and what that means for us is that we really have to accelerate the way we aim to reach our sustainable goals. So what we can do as individual businesses or individual actors is very limited. So it's really a time for us as companies to zoom out and really think about the bigger picture. And this is exactly what we're going to be exploring today. So the power of ecosystems and partnerships, and even cross-sector partnerships, and how that can really unlock not only innovation, but really sustainable development. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the amazing panel here today. And we want to do something a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is a short check-in round where I'm going to just, ask each one of you guys to introduce yourselves. And what I want to hear is two things. First of all, your name and your role. And the second one, I want you to tell me a little bit what ecosystem means in your context or in your role. So to start off, I will hand over to Sang.
Thank you. My name is Sang. I'm from Temasek. I'm the director of digital innovation over there. And I'm really happy to be part of this panel today to talk about something that's really so important for all of us. Ecosystems, where I sit at, it's kind of an interesting question because of the role that the company that I work for plays. I would say that the ecosystem incorporates things such as obviously within the company, like what we do. So there are different departments in there making decisions about investing and how to incorporate ESG or sustainability related parameters in those decisions. Then there are also a suite of portfolio companies that Temasek is involved in or owns. And so those companies also are part of the ecosystem, which we call like our operating system or our family of companies. But then I think the ecosystem is equally important in terms of our engagement with the startup ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem outside of our company and TPCs or portfolio companies. And I think that's really where the magic can happen, is the integration with the outside world, with the inside. And I know what ecosystem means from where I am.
Very interesting. Now I would like to ask Elba.
Hi, good morning. I'm Elba. I'm a smart cities and digitalization technical expert at the Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development from UNDP. So UNDP is the United Nations Development Program. So our work is to work with low and middle income countries and support the governments in implementing projects. And as you can imagine, our traditional actors have always been like NGOs, public authorities, civil society organizations, and other governments. So for us, enlarging this ecosystem means also to integrating new actors, precisely for what you've said, Adela, to try to find new partnerships and new ways to speed up this work toward achieving the SDGs in 2030. So with this, what we mean by ecosystems and how do we approach an ecosystem, how do we work with an ecosystem approach, is to try to generate these innovative partnerships with corporates, with the startups, academia, and all these actors that were not traditionally in the development domain, but that can really bring a lot of value and a lot of new innovative ideas to achieve SDGs.
Now I'd like to introduce Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm an ecosystem and impact manager at Palo IT. So this is a pretty new role for us. And to answer Adela's question, for us at the moment, ecosystem is about a new way of organizing value creation. And I say that because we're a company that's in the world of technology consulting. And that does mean that we work externally a lot, but we're also now in the process of doing our own internal work. And that's kind of transforming to see this new way of how we derive value across the ecosystem, but also how we give back value similarly.
Great, thank you. And now Victoria.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with a great group of people over here. My name is Victoria. I work for ING Bank. I had the cross-fertilization and program services side of the innovation. Cross-fertilization means partnership, ecosystem, working with other people. So that's a great question. What's an ecosystem? So if you remember when we were kids, we were taught to share. We were taught to play with each other. We were taught to play nice with each other. Now, as adults, the context of that teaching when we were children is basically share is cross-fertilization. So this is part of what I do. At ING, what we try to do is we bring the innovation assets or the innovation we have developed closer to our core banking business, and our core banking business closer to our innovation developments and assets. Play with each other. So that's like building relationship, building partnership, building collaboration with one another. And at ING, the way we do that is basically we work in industry groups. We work with other banks, with other companies. We co-create. We try to solve each other's pain points. And we also try to train each other and bring how we do things to other institutions. And then partnership is like playing nice with each other. We're partners in doing stuff. So although we're brilliant at developing ventures and developing ideas, we cannot be brilliant in everything. And we need other brilliant people to partner with us to take certain solutions and certain platforms to the next level.
I really love the metaphor about learning to play together. I think that's great. I would like to follow up with a question to you on that. And on that note, why is this so important right now? Why is this such a topic right now?
Let's take our mobile phones, for example, right? Our mobile phones are an extension of our limbs today. If you look at our mobile phone, you have the manufacturer. You have the supplier of the operating system. You have the apps that you need to make the mobile phone relevant to the user. So there's interdependencies in just a mobile phone. So if you look at business today, automation, digitalization, the way we're doing things, regulation is forcing us to relook the way we work together. We can no longer sustain a silo, we are the center of the universe kind of thinking, right? No man is an island. We've heard this time and time again. No man is an island. We need each other to function socially, economically, and in business. So for me, ecosystem approach, ecosystem development. The way we run our business needs to be circular. It cannot be vertical anymore. But having said that, our organization's ready for that development, our organization ready for that mindset. So maybe I'd like to ask my co-panelists that question. Is your organization ready for an innovation ecosystem time mindset approach? San?
Are you playing with me? Look, I mean, obviously, me as a one person, it's tough for me to speak as an organization. However, I do think they have the right mindset and are definitely on a path towards that for sure. I totally agree with you on the new model. We see examples where the paradigm has shifted, right? So if you look at digital native companies like Google or whatnot, their model of revenue generation and being the one is not through a closed, I'm going to, IP protect and patent everything we build. But it's completely the reverse, where they open source everything and they share it to the community, and then everybody uses it, and then it grows and grows, and then you get stuff like React Native that Facebook did, and so on and so forth. That is a new model. Now, we've seen companies from the old school be able to make that transition to that new school, where the digital native companies. A great example of that is Microsoft. Microsoft, kind of old school. Nadella steps in, changes, so the leadership matters, changes the way that things are thought about. Then all of a sudden, Microsoft opened everything up. Now you got Visual Basic Editor for Macintosh. Never would have happened like 5 years ago. People thought you'd be crazy if you said that. Hell would freeze over before that completely open. Now they open source, they bought GitHub. I mean, that's like the ultimate like signal, right? So that is a company that was able to make that transition. And I think other companies in other industries outside of software, it is up to them. So for us in Temasek, it is a big deal. It is a huge movement that we're doing. I did mention something called the Temasek operating system. It is a way that we want to integrate and work together, at least internally first, and then with our next round and ring around us, and then eventually with other rings even further out.
So I actually love what both of you shared because that's such a different perspective from what I have where I sit, right? Where our organizations, and even with you, Elba, vastly different in sizing. So I think we're just 400 people globally and 140 here in Singapore. And that does mean that we are very, very aware that we're not the center of the universe. But I think we are also on this journey for a very similar reason, and that is we can't do it alone, but we want to be a part of it. And the question is, what part of it do we play, right? So we've been talking about having an ecosystem or having partnerships for a while now. This predates my time in Palo IT. So I would say it's more than 4 years ago when we changed our vision to tech for good. That's very, very high level. And having an ecosystem is just one way of figuring out how can we do it with other people to make sure not just that we're solving problems, we're solving the right people for the right people in the right way. And we can't do it alone simply because, like you said, Victoria, like we are brilliant at what we do, but we're not brilliant at everything. And there's so much more that we can learn from others. And as a result, the more we learn, the more people we partner with, actually, the more challenges arise and the more opportunities as a result. So I think, yeah, it's very interesting to hear how you guys are saying your shift started from a different position. But I think we're all going towards the same direction.
Actually, I want to just weigh in on that. So this is actually, Elba, something I would like to find out from you as well. So for me, it's a great approach. It's a great vision and way of thinking forward. But like my institution, for example, we're saddled with bureaucracy. Strategy is still different from execution, right? And then we still have functional specialization, which basically hinders the entrepreneurial spirit, right? For me, ecosystem is circular. It is not vertical. So in the context of the UNDP, how do you go about, sort of like trying to encourage that kind of thinking when you also have the same issues as I do in terms of bureaucracy and functional specialization?
No, I really like that you raised this question, Dion, actually. So I do think that UNDP is ready to adopt this ecosystem approach. Of course, we are a big organization and you can find like a lot of silos and a lot of bureaucracy, but I think that we are also very service oriented. So at the end, our country offices, so we have a network of 170 country offices located in the countries where we provide service, and they need to respond directly to government needs. So we are quite service oriented and we need to provide these solutions because that's our mission, to help the governments to implement those projects. And actually, there has already begun this shift. We have realized from several years ago that we need to work with other partners, that we need to tap on innovation and on technology, on new ways of doing things, because the way that we used to work is not providing answers fast enough. And actually, you can see throughout the UNDP, we have begun to open accelerator labs, which is precisely within these country offices, teams specialized in identifying and experimenting with new solutions, and they engage with the local innovation ecosystems precisely to identify, pilot, develop these solutions. So I think that indeed, it takes a while because you need to build more structures and break down silos, and that's really difficult in all organizations, but not just multinationals. I've been working in big city councils, and you find the same problem. It's always about silos. So I think it's also about a change of mindset, and I think that it also helps us very much that we are a very open organization in what regards it changing with other countries, with other cultures, seeing things from different perspectives. And this organizational corporate capital that we have, people really open to new ideas and to it changing, that has helped us a lot in adapting and improving in this approach. So
I really
Thank
like
you, Adela.
what you mentioned about technology and innovation, right? Like, and I really like the point you mentioned about what worked before doesn't necessarily work today, right? So I know that, I mean, all of us here work in tech and innovation. So I would like to follow up with a question to you, keeping that in mind. What role does tech and innovation really play in adopting this ecosystems approach?
So I think that intrinsically working in tech and innovation requires an ecosystem approach. So in technology, if you need to innovate, you are not going to do it just if you are an industrial engineer. You need to interact with other disciplines, with other experts, etc. And innovation, it has been so a lot of studies showing that the more different perspectives you put into the table, the more probability there is that there are innovative and disruptive ideas, just because you can see the problems from different perspectives. So I think that when you work in technology and innovation, you are already like a bit forced, or it is natural to work from an ecosystem approach. In our case, working with this approach and focusing on partnerships, it has really helped us to mobilize a lot of actors in order to identify like really functional solutions and the way of actually implementing it. So, for instance, in this year during COVID-19, we launched COVID-19 Detect and Protect Challenge. We partnered with several big organizations and smaller actors. So we partnered with Hackster, which is a community of makers and software developers in open source. We partnered with big companies such as Google, Microsoft to support this initiative. And from there, we opened an open challenge to try to identify solutions that could help halt the spread of COVID-19 in the countries where we work. And it was fascinating because thanks to that and the partnership with all these organizations worldwide, we got solutions proposed from people all around the globe, like from Latin America, Africa, Europe, North America, Asian countries, that could be really replicable and useful to other contexts. And since it was open source, now we already see, like in some countries, like creating makerthons where they are really building these low-cost and open source solutions to wash hands without touching the different elements, etc. So working from an ecosystem approach here has been absolutely instrumental to identify these solutions, because we, on our own, we would have never sought so many solutions, or we would have never been so much creative. Without our country offices, we wouldn't have this direct link with the national governments and their needs. Without the maker community, we wouldn't be fabricating these tools in the country. So I think that it is really instrumental for our work, and it has been proven that it really gives results.
So I would like to follow up to Sang as well, because I think you also have a lot to say in that field of how tech and innovation is really kind of driving.
Sure. What makes you feel that? Is it something I'm wearing?
So I was reading up a little bit on how you guys are working also with startups and different kind of partners and connecting them.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I mean, we're at a point in time now where actually there is no working in silo option. I mean, we've passed that. That was the internet and the internetworking phase that last decade. I mean, today, if you try to do it by yourself, you're going to fail. It's just not even an option. I think for technology, right, I think it plays an absolutely important role in the recognition of the issues with sustainability that we have. I think that earlier, before the rise of the digital transformation and interconnections and what to do with all that data, there was a lot of debate, is there really global warming, or is this really an issue or not? But what has happened over some time, and thankfully, is that the tech has advanced to the point where we have IoT. We have the capability to not only collect and harness, but to also process data. And what that has done is it has unveiled the truth to the point where now you can't, it used to be before you could make an excuse like, oh, we didn't really know back then, so it's not really my fault type of a thing with the sustainability. We're now at a point where you can't make that excuse anymore. The data is there, and it's whether or not you're going to own up to it. And so I think that the technology has played a big role in the, realization of the problem we have. And that's why we have things like what we're talking about now. We got 10 years left, and it is a challenge. It also has changed the visibility of things without internet connection and social media, we wouldn't have things like Greta Thunberg coming up. That would have been impossible 15 years ago. When I graduated from college, now I'm aging myself, there was no such thing. And so it was kind of deflating when I graduated, because I did study environmental science, and I was like, I kind of got deflated because I was like, after I graduated, I was like, well, unless I'm going to be Mahatma Gandhi, there's no way I'm going to like get everybody to rally around and change things. Because of the not in my backyard problem, that, the psychological issue there. And so, but that has changed now. So while there's a lot of challenges, there's also a lot of hope. And I think that's where I find solace, is the hope part. And working with, as you said, the startups and all these, young and old and all types of inclusive entrepreneurs coming out to try and solve this problem using technology is something that, really gets me up every day.
I'd like to add to that one. I think technology is just one part of it. In building an ecosystem, actually, sometimes you don't need the technology. But what technology does is bring reality up front. It links the unlink. It gives you the tools where you can build an ecosystem. It's also interesting that you mentioned sustainability, because the future, I think, is the marriage of sustainability and innovation. How we get there, we don't know, because it's two different languages. If you talk to sustainable people, they can't understand what I'm talking about. And when you talk to innovation people, they can't understand what sustainable people are talking about. So I think in that ecosystem development, these are tools that we have, the technology, and to achieve the vision that we want to achieve.
So, I think as a tech company, it's only fair I have to say something on this as well. No, I do think that, Sang, what you said is absolutely right. That way of working in silos is not an option. It might be a habit at this point, but it's definitely not not a way that you can get success at this stage, right? And I can give a clear example of how we might have failed on this before. So at Palo IT, we are a consultancy, but we're also trying to find new ways of doing, impact, right? And one way of doing that was we launched our Impact Lab, fully funded internally by the group over a year ago. The first two labs were a success in the sense that we produced something, but were there a success in terms of what the impact we had on the people that we wanted to support? Were like, how big was the impact there? Not very big, simply because we didn't have partners. We didn't have partners to co-solution with. We didn't have beneficiaries that we partnered with. And as a result, what we had was a very cool prototype, some very cool marketing around it. But ultimately, if we track what we've actually done as a contribution, it's not that much, right? We learned from that. And then by our third lab, by the way, we do one every quarter, if you're wondering why we have so many. The third one, we focus on IoT, specifically in the farming industry. And we went about it from a very technical angle, right? Then we spoke to a farmer. And then we realized all these things that we could never understand or know what's the reality on the ground. Even, we went on a site visit, we spent a week there. What's a week in a year of farming, right? And farming, we don't talk about 1 year, we talk about multi-years and your yields over that period of time. And then we talked to the UNDP, who has their own expert in agri-tech as well. And we started working together on what was actually the right thing to build and for who and how it should be deployed, what are the conditions that we need to understand and account for. And finally, there was a bit of impact, right? So that was lab 3. And lab 4 was, how can we expand that impact? Let's talk to other farms. Let's talk to other crops. Let's figure out more around, people talk about monoculture killing the fields and the soil, right? Soil degradation. How does tech help with that, right? So those are things that we're grappling with now. And we're trying to also take this approach of expanding our impact just simply by working with people, taking into account their perspective and valuing that we can offer certain expertise, but we can't offer the full solution alone.
And that's very valuable, because I can tell that there's a journey and that there's a lot of learnings every time that you go through this. So I would like to ask a follow-up question around that, which is, I know that the specific role of ecosystem manager, or also moving into a partnership kind of model, is pretty new at Palo. What else can you share to us about the journey to getting there?
So I think, again, as a tech company, the idea of partnerships itself isn't completely new, because the nature of our work just means that we do work with a lot of tools, and that involves partnering with the people who make these tools, right, and services to us as well. And that's like, anyone from the platforms of the world, the Microsofts, the AWSs, to even like the middlewares, everything, design tools. We partner with them because they're essential to us and we're essential to them as well, right? However, I would say that's the start of the partnership journey. We've kind of moved further along away from that towards what I would see as more the forest approach of an ecosystem, right? So forests, they're nurturing, they're self-sustaining, they thrive as long as we don't interfere too much in them. But interestingly, what I thought was that forests actually have many species that communicate to each other. So a lot of their nutrients, their resistance, their immunity are tied to other species that they're linked to, like fungi, right? I think something like 90% of fungi help communicate across the entire forest bed. And that connector role is what I think is very important for where we are in the journey, right? We're small in size. We have a desire to make an impact. We have an incentive to do partnerships, but what makes us want to contribute to a forest? Right. And it's moving away from that bilateral, more transactional type of mindset and approach towards having a partner to one that's more creative, more collaborative, but obviously also more challenging. So we're kind of in the middle ground. So we've got pretty good bilateral partners, right? And the question is, which partners align with that value that we want to do more than the sum of our parts? And we're kind of in the middle of that journey right now.
So now I'm going to direct a question to Victoria. And I know that you guys are not as new as us and Palo into this journey, right? So I would like to ask you, from your point of view, what are some of the key benefits or opportunities that come with this ecosystem approach?
Great question. So let's look at why we're doing it first. For us, I think we barely scratched the surface, although you think that we're ahead of you guys. For me, ecosystem is a never-ending journey. It's a changing environment. It's just not like you have a business strategy and then that's it. You have to constantly change that vision and that model. My team and I, what we're trying to do is create value by inspiring innovation and collaboration within the bank. But at this point in time, we're still architects. We're still building. We're still assembling. We're still constructing. We're still promoting and the gospel of the mindset. So we're still barely scratching the surface because, like I said initially and before, we have certain impediments like bureaucracy, functional specialization. Your strategy is not connected to how you implement and execute it. We still have a lot of roadblocks that we're facing. So although we have been more advanced in the journey, we're still in the journey and we're still doing it. So the benefit, I think, will slowly come. For me, ecosystem is not a short-term gain. It's a long-term value for an organization. So we will see that benefit as people begin to realize that there's another way of doing business, another way of doing work, another way of looking at strategies and how to do things. And basically, going back to my initial introduction, another way of sharing, another way of playing with each other, and another way of playing nice. So the benefits, I would say, will be reaped later on. For the moment, there's more learnings, more things that, okay, we try this, it doesn't work for us, let's try again. So you keep trying, you just keep building, you just fail fast and then move on and then do the next iteration of it. It's like building a venture, basically.
How important would you say that mindset is for this? Because it really sounds like it's a huge part of this.
For me, 100%. Even 200% in anything you do, not just with ecosystem, even your job, right? You can be competent, you can be the best in whatever you do. But if you don't have the mindset, you will never be successful. Because in doing an ecosystem approach, you need a team. You cannot be just one person, I'm going to do everything. You need to make sure you bring everybody into the fold and sort of like infect them with the mindset, infect them with the approach, for lack of a better word.
That's great. I totally agree. And I mean, the mindset is such a big part of it. But what I'm also really curious about, and what I also want to hear from you guys, is what does this mean on a day-to-day basis? So I'm going to direct the question to you, Sang. So what does taking this approach mean for your role, like on a day-to-day basis or for the teams?
Yeah, on a day-to-day, well, first off, I completely agree that it's 100 or 200% mindset. I remember in one of my previous companies, I was doing some presentation. I went up on stage and it's like, if you're not coming into work every day and willing to get fired, don't talk to me. I think the people in the audience, I think some of the bosses were like, what? And I clarified. I was like, don't go out and do stupid things. But I mean, like, the idea is, look, you can't be held hostage to your job every day and it's a sense of security. And that's not what life is about. So you can't be held hostage was my message. And so from the day to day, it starts off that way. And I try to, whoever I work with or interact with, try to convey that. Because, you know, if you don't start from that point of view, then you're already limited. And then, you know, it's like golf, right? Like, you know, even 1 degree when you tee off, the end result is huge because of the distance traveled. So like the starting has to be like that. And so every day, that's one of the things I start out with. Now, once the day gets going and, you know, we all have our strategy plans and our you know, programs and, you know, the holy grail end game. It's really about, you know, operating actually as a startup. One of the things I always tell people is to stop making certain assumptions, because that is, again, another limiter or something that can, you know, sink the ship later on. There's this thing I was just recently writing about where you go into a meeting room, boardroom, and all you hear is like, oh, well, these are the known unknowns. And then, yeah, we have the unknown unknowns. And then it's like, talk about that for 40 minutes. And I'm like, what about the known knowns? Because some of those might not be true. And that will just completely sink your ship like 4 months from now, right? You're busy talking about these unknown unknowns, which is, how are you going to know the unknown unknowns anyway? So that's the other thing I try to instill is just always, like a good startup founder will always do, is always question what you're doing over and over again, just to make sure, like, are you doing this correctly? Is this the right thing to do? So I think, like, I mean, I could go on, but those are two things that come to my head. Yeah. And
I'm very curious to hear also from UNDP. What does this mean in practice or in day to day?
No, I think that I completely agree with what you all have said, actually, because I think that working in an ecosystem way, with an ecosystem approach, it implies that the path is not linear. So you do not have one objective and, you know, like action A, B, and C to get there. Normally, when you are interacting with new partners, with different actors, you need to, like, be flexible, understand what is their perspective, where is the win-win, because we all are different organizations and we all have a different objective at the end. So how can you collaborate with these organizations so we all get the benefit, we all get the impact that we're wishing to achieve? So I think that it's more like a non-linear path. You need a lot of flexibility, and in that, I think that the mindset is completely key, and you need to be ready to change your perspective, to try to empathize with the person that you're talking with. You need to be creative in the ways of collaboration. So it also requires a different mindset and a skill set, I think, to work from this ecosystem approach. And I really like to talk about it like as a journey, as you said, because it's really a path with each partner for each project. So it's, and as you said too, it's not something in the short term. It doesn't provide you immediate results, but it's like long-term partnerships, and you do like a step by step. You generate this trust and this knowledge of your partner that at the end will allow you to like do a bigger project, generate bigger impact, or even. And I think that it is really interesting now with COVID-19 how innovation ecosystems have been providing answers to this new challenge. It just didn't come because you have one startup and one university that spontaneously decided to collaborate. You have long-term relationships. They have, when the innovation have been faster and better and been able to test, etc., and integrate more actors, is where all these actors were already collaborating before the challenge arrived. So I think that it's a journey, it's long-term, and it's a process of experimentation and understanding and looking for this win-win.
Completely, 100%. And now what I would like to do is maybe launch a poll to the audience just to make sure that I want to hear a little bit what you guys think. So we're going to launch a poll right now into the call. And the question is, based on everything that you've been hearing so far, hearing about the panelists, so do you believe you're already involved in an ecosystem? How does this feel for you guys? So we're launching the poll now. Perfect. I'm going to let you guys answer. And then, yeah, okay, so I think that's all really, really interesting. What I would like to also touch on a little bit is what are some of the challenges and opportunities? And for that, I would like to ask you, Victoria, what are some of these challenges and opportunities that have emerged?
So we're still a bank. For us, the challenge is really regulations. Regulations on banking secrecy, on security, on data. So for us, that challenge is quite a huge hill to climb. So how do you work around, not really work around, I shouldn't be saying work around. How do you work with a, how do you, yeah, you didn't hear that. How do you work with that kind of environment? How do you develop the ecosystem that you need to put in place to accelerate and to be successful in that kind of environment? And that's a work in progress that we have at the moment.
Agree. So how has it been for Paulo, for example? Paulo, that has also recently, what are some challenges or opportunities that have risen?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to state that we do comply as well. We do when we work with our clients and partners. In fact, if anything, these relationships keep us more honest and up to date as well. Because again, we're a small company, right? When we work with these multinationals, when our partners are Microsoft and they're updating policies, not just around security and privacy, but around fair work, around equality, it's usually, a clear sign, of what needs to be done. But yeah, anyway, on challenges, where do I begin? No, I think, like I mentioned earlier, right, challenges are a big part of why this is such a fulfilling and meaningful way to actually do work. So to kind of like tie it back to the previous segment, right, I love how Elba mentioned the fluidity of how when you work with partners, it's very contextual. It's also very creative, right? And what that means is that it's challenging, right? Because you're figuring it out for the first time every single time, right? And in that time, you just need to trust the people you work with. You need to find good people to work with. And I think oftentimes the worst challenges can always be overcome by the best intentions. And that's usually through alignment. It's usually through having a vision. It's bigger than yourself, right? I mean, the last thing we want to do is go into work and say, all I have to do is work and no one cares about what I actually do, right? When you're working in partnership, the challenges actually, to me anyway, seem very worthwhile because people care about what you do and you're making an impact.
So the poll results are in, and I noticed that over 84% of the people have responded that yes, they do feel like they're already part of an ecosystem. So I think that's actually a very interesting segue to move into one of the last kind of topics that I want to touch with you guys. So how to get started, and also about future and opportunities. And the first thing that I would like to ask, and I'll ask that to you, Sang, with your ecosystem approach to partnerships. One of the biggest things is always around how do you measure success, or how do you know you've been successful? Can you even measure success? Do you have any thoughts around that?
You saved the hardest question for me.
There's no wrong answer.
Please. Look, measuring success, or the dangerous word of KPIs or metrics when it comes to innovation. Yeah, look, obviously the traditional ways of measuring kind of don't work. Sometimes actually stifles innovation. You can go with pointers that give you some idea of how things are going. So number of partnerships you've created, number of engagements, the length of repeat engagements. But what's interesting for me, right, and this is something that I'm actually experimenting with right now is sustainability is a little bit different because, like COVID-19, there's an underlying purpose. This is a purpose-driven thing that's going on, right? It's not just a bunch of accelerators or incubators out to make a lot of cash and be the next unicorn billionaire. So because of that, right, because there's this underpinning of a purpose, I try to flip it. So like that should be the guiding North Star on any partnership that I get involved with. And because of that, that should deconflict or supersede any other competitive or whatever complications that arise. And all the success should be measured through that purpose. And so it really then translates into the impact of sustainability as a measurement ultimately. It supersedes your capital equity returns and how many partners. Even if you make one partnership, but the result is that you achieve some serious sustainability, that's a success. And so that's the way I look at it. Problem is, as you all know, it's hard to, we're working on measuring impact measurement for sustainability. And I know the UNDP is very involved with that right now. Yeah.
So I would also like to follow up and ask exactly that to UNDP. Like, what are your thoughts around this?
So for us, impact is ultimately delivering services or improving the life of the citizen. So providing this support to national, local governments, and ultimately improving citizens' life in this context. This said, I think that also when you work with from an ecosystem approach, impact is also generating these long-lasting relationships that can lead to one of these impactful projects. So I think that it's twofold. From one side is like the projects that you get to do and to generate this direct benefit to the communities, and on the other side, you also need to integrate that you are building relationships for the future. So it has you need to be aware of these two dimensions, like what you're doing this year and what you will be able to do next year, and that you need to invest in these partnerships and in knowing new partners and generating these trust relationships so that you can actually build more next year.
That's super interesting. And I would like to follow up with you, Victoria. So let's say, okay, we talk about, measuring success. It can look like totally different things for different companies. What advice would you give to similar companies or similar startups, even because you work with so many different partners, on how to get started into moving into an ecosystem approach or to think of in this way?
Oh, that's an interesting question. This is very dangerous. So for me, this is just me. Forget about everything you know. That's my advice. Forget about everything you know. Stop thinking about what other people have done, right? It's good to learn from the lessons. It's good to learn from what they've done and where they're successful. But it doesn't mean that they will be successful in the same manner. What you've done before, how you performed before, doesn't really give you an indication of how you'll perform in the future. So throw away everything you've learned, throw away everything you know, and actually be creative. Look at a different perspective. I mean, I have to bring this to this chat. So San posted this morning on LinkedIn this very interesting photo. And it really stuck in my head because for me, I'm a believer of different perspective. So the photo that he posted was basically of a baby inside a crib looking at this mobile going around, right? So the parents looking at it saying, oh, look, he's enjoying the mobile, right? But then if you look at the perspective of the kid, he's just looking at the bottoms of many animals. So first of all, we would like to apologize to our children for subjecting you to that. But I mean, taking that example in context is like you have to look at different things in different perspective. You cannot really fit something in the box that you're in because your journey is totally different from everybody else.
Completely agree. That's a very inspiring thing to say. And I think it's all about really understanding the context. So now we are actually at the last 10 minutes of our session. So now what we would love to do is have a little bit of a Q&A. And I know you guys have been adding in some questions and we have quite a few here. So I'm going to bring up some of the questions. And the first one is actually to Victoria. So I'm going to follow up on you. And here's a really great question. So first of all, they want to thank you. Great stuff. And then they're very curious on how you're convincing your respective organizations to move in this direction, especially on building an ecosystem, especially in times where innovation budgets are particularly tight.
Great question. So for me, I'm a believer in convincing people. You need to show them. It's by showing them that there is this new way, there's this new path that they can see for themselves, and they get convinced. We can talk about this like forever. We can talk about this, and we can show many different types of theory. But at the end of the day, is the conversion of the theory and the thinking that brings greater impact. So for me, how am I convincing them? Results. Showing them how it looks like. Showing them how it's done. Showing them it can be done.
Amazing stuff. And actually, this question was also directed to Sang. It was directed to both of you. So I would like to hear a little bit from your side as well.
Yeah, no, I total agreement with what Victoria said. In fact, I would say, actually, be wary of the innovation program that has hundreds of millions of dollars coming at you, because that is not the way a startup works. Startups don't get $100 million on day one. In fact, it's absolutely true. What you want to do is start small, move fast, and that's exactly what you need to do. And you don't need a lot of capital for that. So yes, it's budgets might not be great now, but that's not as relevant. What you need to do is to gather and rally around people with you. My team is not huge. In fact, it's very small. but the thing is, because you build community and you work with other people who are on the same journey with you, and they will go the extra mile. They will work on night times and weekends because it's not a job. And you get enough of these people, you don't need a huge budget. And then exactly as you said, you start showing wins here and there. It'll start percolating. And then it's going to be like, oh, okay. Here's your 100 million. I mean,
that's really good. And I would like to follow up with another question for you as well. And it's about getting started. So the question was, how can startups or small companies get started and becoming a meaningful part of ecosystems? What should they do?
By the way, SmartUps. That's awesome. I'm going to start using that one. Honestly, the hardest part of getting started is getting started. I can't tell you how many of people out there are thinking about starting something but don't. I think if I were to show a chart of what that percentage is, it's like vast majority, and then you have this tiny sliver of people who actually took the plunge. So I think that's the question before the question is, okay, now let's say you took the plunge. You're going to get started, right? How do you do it? Well, this is how you have to be scrappy, right? This is the entrepreneurial founder spirit. You make do with what little you have and with an unknown canvas. You just have to, as Victoria said, got to be creative, got to look at all angles, got to have very thick skin, and don't care about if you get rejected, because you're gonna get rejected. It's a funny story, but when I was younger, there's this one guy, and he would always have the prettiest girlfriends. And I was like, how? I was very, when you're a teenager, you have, testosterone. You're like, how is this guy? And then I asked him one day, and he's like, bro, I just ask a lot of girls out, and it's just a numbers game. And then it hit me. I was like, yeah, instead of just targeting like a few people to try your luck with, no, and that's the way you got it. You just got to go out and then try a lot, be creative, and don't get, demotivated if it doesn't work out.
So now to you, Michelle, what advice would you give to small companies or small to medium companies that are just getting started on this journey?
Even though we're smaller as well, I do echo what both co-panelists have said. You have to show results, but you also have to show why you're the right person to do it. And I think a part of that is kind of doing your own groundwork, building your own ecosystem to begin with as well, seeking out advice, seeking out mentorship, talking to people about what's worked, what hasn't, right? All of these are part of your ecosystems, and maybe you can bring them into your companies as well in the process, right? But you only learn by trying and talking to people and going out there, and you have to make up your mind based on what you hear and gather from there, but you have to trust that you want to do something that's meaningful, like building an ecosystem being one of them, and just start.
Amazing stuff. We have one last question, and this one I'm going to leave open to whoever wants to answer it. And it's around, how do you define what kind of ecosystem partners to bring on board? Is it alignment to culture? Is it alignment to mindset? What kind of things do you look for when bringing them on in the journey? And I'm going to ask this to Michelle.
It's unfair because you know I have an answer. So when we first started out, it was, you know, beggars can't be choosers, right? Whoever wants to work with us, let's talk to them. Let's try to work with them. And then we progressed and we started realizing there are some people that are easier to work with than others. Why is that so? We dug into it, right? Is it an alignment in values? Is it an alignment in what we want out of a partnership? All those things are valid, right? We moved on, right? And we started selecting people based on these things. You know, what do we want out of it? Can we seek alignment? Do we align on how a partnership should work? You know, how transactional is it going to be? And now we've kind of moved on to a framework where we still want to be open. We don't want to say no to people because, again, you don't know what you're saying no to until you've tried working with them. So we try everything at least once, I would say. But as a result of that, we do also prioritize accordingly based on that experience. So we do tier our partners, not very strictly. There's no like rank and file there, but there are prioritizations on how much time we want to invest in them as a result of how closely they align to things such as our values, wanting to harness the power of technology for good, how much they actually bring value again to our consultants, how much can we learn from them, how much do they expose us to more things, but also how much can we do together? You know, how willing are these people to actually do stuff with us? So it's very fluffy, I know. On the topic of KPIs, I'm glad we didn't get asked that. But yeah, it's definitely, there's prioritization more so than, you know, how do we structure them?
I'd just like to add to that one. So similar to you, we have a framework that you say, okay, these are the things that we need to do when we bring on a partnership, or we work with another bank, or we work with another fintech. But the reality of it is it has to have value for both of you, right? Both players, or all the players in your ecosystem, because we're there to make life easier for all of us. So for me, we can have a structured way of bringing in, we have a structured way of aligning things, but if it doesn't bring any value and it doesn't make life easier for us, it doesn't matter. So if, for example, one of my core business suddenly become more efficient because they no longer have to do everything by paper or run to a client to bring a certain document, that for me is value, and that for me is impact, and that makes their life easier.
Amazing stuff and very inspiring. And with that thought, we would like to already start wrapping up the session. And as a key takeaway, thank you so much again to all of our amazing panelists for sharing their insights. And what I take away from this session is really the importance of mindset, and really the importance of looking at this on a case-by-case basis, and really acknowledging the power that you can have by working in a partnership or by working on an ecosystem more than as a single actor. So amazing stuff. Big thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining. And we would also like to thank our sponsors for the session. So as a closing thought, please look for us on social media. We're there. And this is actually the first in a series of 3 events run together with UNDP in the upcoming weeks. So stay in the loop and keep posted. And please join for the next one. Thank you.